Thanks, Esther. So as stated here on this slide, our ECHO sessions are in part funded by PALIN Canada and their Palliative Care ECHO project, which in turn is funded by a financial contribution from Health Canada. So just as a disclaimer that what we're sharing here today doesn't necessarily represent the views of Health Canada. All right, so as I mentioned, before we hear from our presenters today, I'd like to share this video. It offers a bit of a background to wind phones and explains how the first one came about. If you know anything about them, you may have seen that there's a couple different news stories and pieces out there. There's a few different videos I came across, but I found that this one in particular really kind of captured the story well. Just as a note, it isn't narrated, but there is text on the screen, so I do hope you're able to follow along. I'd love to just give a chance for anyone who'd like to kind of reflect or comment on how that video felt to you. Maybe you've seen it before, maybe this is the first time. Um, yeah, just any feedback that you'd like to share. We'd love to hear that. Feel free to post in the chat or raise your virtual hand. Something just kind of one of my first thoughts the first time I saw it was just how an individual's grief experience um, and how what they might use to kind of support themselves through that, a tool they might use like a wind phone and building that, in on their property, just the power that it can be used for when we can share that with others. And I think the scale that we might experience day to day, I don't think is quite the same as to what they experienced in the community in Japan, but just being able to see how one person sharing their story and sharing what has helped them can really have that ripple effect to so many others. Yeah, just some comments in the chat. Very touching video, heartwarming. All right. So now I would like to transition. Oh, sorry, just another comment here in the chat. Thank you, Katie. Grief is cross-cultural. It's a very human experience. Yeah, thank you so much for that reflection. Yeah, just knowing that it touches us all wherever we are. So I'd like to transition over to hear from some communities within BC who have set up a wind phone. First off, we have Brittany Borean here, who is the Bereavement Services Coordinator at Crossroads Hospice Society. So Brittany, just like to turn it over to you to share a bit about your experience, how the wind phone in your area came to be, and if you have any stories that you might be able to share with us about how it's been received in your community.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, and I'm so glad this is such a nice turnout. Yeah, so there is our phone over the wind on the screen. We had our phone established in August 2021, so right in the middle of the pandemic. Yeah, it really came to be months prior. We had a volunteer who had saw an article for the wind phone in Olympia, Washington, which was just like a piece of plywood in a forest with a phone attached. And so we kind of tucked it away because we were super interested but weren't sure like how to make that come to life. And so yeah, fast forward, we were like, what's the feasibility of us doing this? Because as we all know, the impacts of COVID and the havoc that it wreaked on grieving individuals in our community, and just making it so they can't go anywhere. They have to be either outside in areas like this or tucked away in their own little bubbles. So we really wanted to do something that would be a way to kind of give back and open that space up for grief in the community. So originally we were trying to think of like, okay, how do we construct this? I am not a carpenter. I'm like, am I going to put a box on a stick and find a phone? I don't know. But oh, sorry, let me just move that. We had reached out to our city because we actually have a labyrinth healing garden, which is part of our Crossroads Hospice. We created that in like 2012. And so we had an existing labyrinth in a city park rather. And so we approached the city to say, hey, we're looking to create this phone of the wind. These are our reasons. Is this something that would be feasible? And we spoke to the superintendent of parks. Initially, we thought we were just trying to like get permission because we thought we would then turn it over to our volunteers to see like how we could make this come to life. But it was really beautiful because the superintendent of parks was like, I love this idea. Like, let me see if we can get our city carpenter on it to help out. And that's what began. So the city carpenter with the city of Port Moody, because we serve Tri-Cities, so Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, and Port Moody. And so he found a phone booth, like an old, it was out of service, but like an old TELUS phone booth along a road in Port Moody, and took the measurements. He had like brought us a mock-up, and it looked great to us. So we gave him the go ahead, and he ended up creating this beautiful phone of the wind that you see here. Yeah, the additional piece that made it like all the more touching was he, unbeknownst to us, made it the sides, which you can't quite see from this photo, but the frame and the sides are made from recycled memorial benches. So, you know, in all cities, we have those benches with people's names on them. And so when they would need to be replaced, they kept, I guess, the lumber. And so that's what he used to create this phone. Yeah, so on just so many different levels, the level of like love and care that went into this was so neat. The phone itself, I ended up finding off of Facebook Marketplace from like a collector. It's like an old school rotary phone. And then a colleague's partner painted the sign above to say that it was the phone of the wind. And you can see we have a little sign in the back too that briefly describes what it is. And there's also a QR code that we've attached to the poster. And the QR code links to our website, where we talk about the history of the phone of the wind. And then there's also a page on our website, like a document that we've attached on like ideas for like how to use it. So for people that might be intrigued, but might get caught up in like, I don't know if there's a proper way to use this. Sometimes it can just be helpful to have a little bit of a guide to prompt that. So yeah, so that's what that links. And yeah, it was beautiful because it was COVID. We didn't have a chance to do like a big unveiling. It was kind of just a quiet, like we launched it through our social media. But it got picked up quite quickly by like a couple of our local newspapers. And then eventually Global did a little TV segment on it, which was really exciting for us. But it's been really well received in our community. We've had some, like we have our like regular feedback from people who are just like, oh, when they kind of put two and two together, like Crossroads and the phone of the wind. It's really lovely. It's been well received. We had a woman who, I guess she has quite a large following on like, I think it must have been TikTok, and she had lost her brother, and was taking part in our services at Crossroads. And once this was up, she went and did a video, and the video included like her little daughter, who I don't know, must have been around 2 years old. So her little 2-year-old daughter, like speaking to her uncle through the phone. And she herself said she's witnessed quite a few different like families with children, because children, we know they don't have those like blocks and that like embarrassment or shame about using something like this. It's like, it's just this natural place for curiosity for kids, which has been really neat to see. Yeah, and we because it's right next to our garden, our labyrinth, it is like the meeting spot for our weekly walking group. So we're able to also raise awareness that way, because any new clients that are coming in are able to, they're introduced to it through our volunteers who point it out. So yeah, it's another kind of neat response, and we weren't able to get this up and running yet, but there was a gentleman who worked in the downtown east side, and he connected with us and came out to view the phone because he really wanted to try to figure out how to create a program where he'd support people coming along transit to come use the phone, because he was like, oh, this would be so powerful if it was like in Crab Park or something that was a lot closer, just because of the opioid epidemic and the amount of people there that are grieving loved ones. And himself included, like a lot of staff have experienced the loss of each other and of clients. And so, yeah, I think it really struck a chord when it was launched. And yeah, we were worried like about, and I'm sure everyone here that has had a phone, because I recognize some hospice societies here, I think you guys have phones too. We were worried initially about like vandalism because it is in like a public park, but nothing like that has happened. And so I do think that speaks to like, regardless, people know like that impact of this. And yeah, I think that's kind of how it came to be and how we created it. We're really lucky in the sense of, I know people in the past when they've contacted to ask like in terms of upkeep, because we're there every week with our walking group, we take a peek at it to make sure it's all good. But when there has had to been things like the poster like thing fell off or the phone itself came loose, the gentleman who created it, the carpenter with the city, he's on it and he'll take care of it and fix it. So we're very blessed that way. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Brittany. It sounds like you have a really supportive community there and a number of people kind of coming together to really help bring this to just being able to happen and to be able to provide this for your community, and that you be able to share that with others is so wonderful. Just wanted to open up if anyone has any questions for Brittany or anything they'd like to share. Jaylene, my apologies. I see your comment in the chat from earlier. Just your comment, and Brittany, you were kind of speaking to something similar about this. Jaylene, did you want to unmute and share?
Oh, nice.
I can't actually see myself, so I don't know if I'm on.
We can hear you and see you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I work in harm reduction. We do harm reduction programming, and I work supporting community that is using substances and are often unhoused or unsafely housed. And we do monthly peer debrief and support sessions. And out of one of these sessions came the idea of how we can hold space for grief and loss with the community that is living in collapse every day, that this is the reality for that community, and the lack of access to grief support and to counseling services for that community. And so this idea of the phone of the wind came to us through one of our facilitators. And so we've been talking about the possibility and sort of dreaming and visioning on this idea of bringing this to our community to live on the streets as a way to allow people space and place to have these, to have their grief held.
Thanks so much for sharing, Jaylene. Just what you said there at the end, space and place. I think that's just so fitting to be able to bring something to people where they're at, right? That's very neat to hear. Anyone else would like to share? Any questions? Anthony, I see your comment in the chat, or your question in the chat. Is there a map of locations of wind phones in BC? I'm not aware of one that's specific to BC, but what I did find, and I'll make sure, I'll see if I can get it in the chat, this link, or it'll for sure be in our follow-up notes from today's session. But there is a website called My Wind Phone that someone has created, and they've kind of started a bit of a repository, and so you can kind of sign up and submit your wind phone, and it can be posted on there. And people share pictures as well, so you can get ideas if you'd like to set one up. Yeah, not one specifically that I'm aware of that's for BC, but it is kind of one that is a repository kind of globally, which is very neat to see. So does anyone else have any more info on that, perhaps? Hi, Katie, feel free to unmute.
Hi, sorry, I don't have info on the locations. I see that someone just put the link in the chat though. But Brittany, I do have a question for you. It's kind of specific. In Revelstoke, we've been working towards putting a wind phone in our community for a little while with some local artists, and we have a committee. And the idea of having a QR code has come up a number of times. However, the different individuals on the committee that have researched this have discovered that the QR code is a subscription-based item. And I was just wondering how you went about that and what your QR code system kind of looks like, if it's to a guest page, if it's to your hospice website, what that looks like for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. No, ours is, so we do have, and like we have, you know, Canva, you can create everything. We have like the paid subscription for Canva, and you generate QR codes directly through. So on our poster, for us, we just put the URL into our, because the link is connected to our website. We have a page on our website for the Phone of the Wind. So we literally just tuck that into the QR code creator on Canva, and it generates the code. So anybody can walk up to it, and like a lot of people, they should be able to just directly put their camera to it, and it'll just bring up the web page, provided they have data. Because I don't think there's a community center nearby, but I don't think the Wi-Fi will be that strong. But yeah, in terms of subscription, I guess it would be like our Canva subscription. But beyond that, anybody like walking up to it should be able to just scan it. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if I can be of much more help, but
That's okay. That's great. Sorry, I'm very specific with this one. So once you generate that QR code, you don't need to uphold it. It's created, it's one and done, and that code goes to your website.
yeah, provided the website doesn't change at all, which ours will be soon. So now that I'm speaking this out loud, I'm also like, oh, right, we're gonna have to replace the poster.
Okay.
But as long as the link stays the same, it's the same. Yeah.
Awesome. And do you have engagement with the website? Like they can leave a guest book kind of thing, or is it just the info, they go to the website to visit?
It's just the info. We would love to have done a guest book, like I know in the original Phone of the Wind, and I think a few others have those as well. But no, we don't have kind of a virtual guest book or a physical guest book at this point.
Okay. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much. I do believe, and correct me if anyone else if I'm wrong on this, I think with the free version of Canva as well, I think those QR codes do stay.
Nice.
They're maintained. You don't have to, yeah. So if you wanted to try that, Katie, if you guys don't have a subscription, it should work. I know I've used it for some other things and it has stayed. So again, as long as the website itself doesn't change the actual URL, then you should be good.
A little fun fact about Canva. I have a personal one that I pay for and I use it all the time for work. But a friend who also works in nonprofits let me know that Canva will give a free paid subscription to nonprofits.
Oh,
So I
nice.
haven't checked that out yet, but if anyone's who's looking to use that website, it's awesome software for developing any type of visuals. And if you're a nonprofit, rather than paying the $150 a year, supposedly nonprofits get it for free. So it will take some investigating and figuring out how to do that, but thought I'd share.
Thanks so much, Katie. That's great. So hopefully we're all going to be looking into that after this now. Okay, Ellie Scott, thank you. Yes, our company has a free Canva account, so that's wonderful. Before we move on, any other questions or comments for Brittany? All right. Well, I'd like to transition over to Heather Fraser, who is joining us today from Oceanside Hospice Society. Heather, could you just, similar to Brittany, just share a bit of your experience setting up your Phone of the Wind, and if you have any stories that you might be able to share with us about how it's been received.
Great, thank you so much. And it's great to see everybody here. We're in Qualicum Beach, beautiful Qualicum Beach on Vancouver Island. We cover our area is from Nanoose Bay to Deep Bay from the water, a little bit inland. So we have quite a large catchment area. We never heard about the wind phone until it was brought to our attention by one of our volunteers. He sent this great article on it. And after quite a bit of discussion about how we would go about it, and we do have a lot of walking areas in all of the catchments that we cover, but we were wondering how we were going to look after it if we had 3 different ones in different areas. So after a lot of discussion, we thought it would be great to have it on our property. We are very lucky. We our resource center is an old home, 100 years old. It's beautiful. We have gorgeous property, and we have this lovely wooded area that actually we never used. We, would walk by it, and there's lots of deer and birds. It's beautiful. So we looked at it, talked about the site quite often, and then we had to figure out how we were going to, what it was going to look like. We engaged with another one of our volunteers, and he came up with this plan. What you can see has the bench, a telephone aside. It is a push button phone. It is it's beautiful the way he's built it. It's beautiful. And we had a lot of different ideas, but when we saw his drawings, it was completely agreed that that's what we wanted. And that was our vision for this. Built it up for us, and he put a lot of work into it. The gentleman that who sent the original idea to us, said that he would help purchase wood. We had wood donated, we had the lattice donated, and we had an opening presentation to the community. The wind phone at that time had not been put into the garden yet, into the woods. So it looked a little odd with this structure just sitting in the yard. But we had a celebrant come in, and I think there was about 20 people that came. We had a lovely article in the newspaper that explained it. And then a couple of months later, we got the chance to move an area where we could put it. And our counselors are they make sure that they talk about it. They will walk people to it. After the article in the newspaper, we did have people that were curious as to what it was. Where it's located, all of our windows, we can't actually see into it. So it is very private, as you can see with the woods. It is used probably by about 35% of our clients will use it. We have some facilitators for our groups that will walk them. We also have a labyrinth. So at the end of their group, they'll take them out to the labyrinth, or they'll take them to the wind phone. We see families that have come down with children. It's something, I don't want to use the word that comes to me is a sacred area. It is a place where people can go. It's private. There's nobody there to listen, so they can say what they have in their heart. It's such a lovely match for our woods. It blends in beautifully. Deer walk by. So yeah, we're hoping to get more people, get more information out about it. So yeah, we've only had it a year, so we're in the beginning stages, but it's lovely. It's lovely.
Thanks so much for sharing, Heather. I'd like to open it up to any questions or comments for Heather. Heather, you mentioned that you have counselors that will often kind of refer to it or maybe walk with clients there. Have you received any concerns from people about using it like on their own if they're not seeing a counselor? Has anyone kind of shared any concerns about people kind of being left maybe in a space of grief without that support if a counselor or someone isn't there with them?
No, we haven't yet. We have hospice information in, by the phone if they need us. They also, some people will come into the front door and ask where it is. So we're here 5 days a week. So we're available, but not yet. We haven't had any worries about that.
I'm from Cathet, Powell River, and we're in the process of putting trying to organize a phone, and we've thought about where to put it. And I think some of the concerns about privacy and also safety. We have lots of beautiful trails in our area, but they're not really either. They're not maintained, or they're people are passing by all the time. And so we're looking at putting it in the cemetery. We have a beautiful cemetery, and with lots of, in the old part, especially in a couple of other places where there's lots of privacy. But there also is a sense of there's people around. If someone, that someone feels they'll be safe there and private. And so our regional district has reacted positively to that. So we're just sort of moving along. But I wondered if so far people have thought that's a good idea, but I just wondered if people have thoughts or ideas about having it located in the cemetery. We don't have we have a little office in a mall, so we don't, our hospice doesn't have a particular spot to put it as of yet.
Thanks so much, Sheila. Any thoughts or feedback either from Brittany or Heather or anyone else who's joining us here today? Yes, Katie.
So I mentioned that Revelstoke, we are in the process of designing one, implementing one, creating a wind phone. A snafu that we had come up was that we had projected it to be on public land. And so with that, we needed to go through the city of Revelstoke. We needed to consult our public art committee because we were bringing local artists on board for the structure of it. And so then the actual structure would then be, it would be donated by hospice, but then any maintenance to it would be upkept by the city. It would be city property. Except the one park that we essentially did all of our designs around with our local artists. The city part of their checklist was for us to consult with the neighbors who are nearby. And these neighbors were not interested in absolutely anything being in this park overlooking the river. And so because of that, we kind of had to go back to the drawing board. It wasn't the city that denied us, but it was their process of it that we needed to consult the neighbors, and the neighbors were a very hard no with anything going on there. So we've kind of stuck to public land, city land with that. Our cemetery happens to be like across Highway 1 on the other side away from downtown. So a part of it for us was making sure that it's in kind of a walkable area, foot traffic. So not only a place to utilize the wind phone, but if somebody's on their lunch from downtown, that it could be a beautiful place for them to be, to kind of create it an area of solace. So I'd say if you're looking for a place for it, public lands would be great, but chatting with your municipality to make sure that you're abiding by whatever checklist they may have. Because if you have a public art committee, you may need to loop them into it. Like we had to pitch this to a lot of people. And unfortunately, the neighbors of the place had the final say. So that took us back to the drawing board. So just to make sure you've got all the processes kind of checked off if you're looking at different places.
Yeah, our cemetery is run by the regional district, and it seems everybody seems really on board, but they'll make a formal decision in a couple weeks. So then we'll know. That'll be. Yeah, I just wondered about having it in the cemetery. It just seems to me it's a place, well, it's a place where people go and might be looking for another kind of solace than standing and looking at a gravestone. And also a lot of people go there, but our town is all spread out, so there's no central place where it would be walkable for people. But it is in a small, like it's in Cranberry, which is a small, it's walkable within that community.
I think I think it's a great idea. Like I do know, I think there's been a few other up and around BC and that have done it in cemeteries. And I know like even for the clients I support, I have a handful that go to their local cemetery. Their person is not there, but they just find the space to be one where they can openly express and not have to worry because it's an acceptable place if you're crying in a cemetery. So I think that's a really beautiful option.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Katie, you were kind of speaking to this before, but Anthony, I see your question. Just can anyone speak to challenges encountered in identifying a location for a wind phone, getting municipal support, and how you overcame these challenges? Is there anyone else you'd like to share on that? Anything that you've encountered, any kind of barriers?
If I may just answer Olga's question in the chat through my words as opposed to my typing. Olga, I kind of get this sense that these neighbors have had this park behind their house for a very long time, and they have been very inflexible with this city as to what's going in there. There's 2 memorial benches that are there in that small park, and the city put in a 3rd, but then these neighbors referenced some agreement that they had with the municipality X amount of years ago, that there would be nothing more than the 2 memorial benches. So they actually had that 3rd memorial bench taken out. So I kind of just get it's the sense of not in my backyard, even if it is a beautiful thing, no matter what the project is, they just are not interested in that. I don't think it had anything to do with the wind phone. I think it had to do with their park.
Thanks, Katie. Catrielle.
Yeah, it's not so much a challenge in terms of identifying a location in terms of like municipality. In fact, just to try and bypass the inevitable runaround process, municipal red tape that goes along with that. There was kind of a citizen initiative near where I live where they were trying to, someone who's well connected with some local educational institutions was trying to leverage some of their like public-private land kind of situation with a campus that was by a river that had a nice little kind of trail wooded section, and that specific campus also provided training in terms of like spiritual care and psychosocial care. And so that person kind of approached the campus about, is this something that they would be willing to provide on their campus or to have on their campus if that person was able to secure the required funding to like make it happen. And basically the director, the dean of the spiritual care, psychosocial services, I can't remember exactly, basically raised concerns about, well, what if someone is kind of like in the process of using the wind phone, becomes distressed, and then so on and so forth, a lack of accompaniment. And that basically became a non-starter for like an evolving conversation, even kind of proposing like, what if, there was information there of saying like, if you're looking for additional care support, if you need additional care support, here's where you can find resources. That didn't seem to alleviate the concerns in terms of liability and so on, or the lack of professional accompaniment or whatnot for the bereaved person. So I'm just wondering if is there anything out there? I know the literature that I found hasn't been super extensive. And because it's the university department dean, I was like, if it's not peer reviewed, I don't know if it would be that impactful, but I'm just wondering from people's experiences if that has been at all a concern or an experience anyone's had.
Thanks, Catriel. Great question. Anyone have any comments or feedback about that? Heather, yeah.
It's interesting. The people that we see coming out at the end of the path, you can tell they've been crying, and that I think they also come out with a little bit of an easier feeling than they had going in. One thing with ours, why we put the bench in it, was so that they had a place to sit, and after the conversation that they had a place just to ground themselves again. And we've been very lucky that it has worked out very well, and we've not run into that.
Yes, Jaylene.
Yeah, I mean, I said it in the chat, but I feel like I want to give voice to that, and or voice to my thoughts about this, that I have my own grief that comes up, because I feel like so much of this conversation really is centered around like how deeply embedded colonization is in our culture, and that these conversations always have to go back to this idea of liability, and in the end, what I feel like is a surveillance of a very human experience. And I just wanted to give my voice to that that grief. I always want to work towards this idea of us having our own autonomy and agency in our grief, and what that means, and that the idea that this is a space and place for that. And my own grief comes up around that this continues to circle back to these conversations about liability and surveillance.
Thanks so much for sharing, Jaylene. I'm curious if anyone else who is yes, Katie. Yeah, I see your hand.
Thank you for allowing me to take up so much space in the conversation today. When we were trying to figure out placement and privacy with the wind phone, we thought of how can we make it so that if there's someone using it, that another person won't stumble into their space. And with that, we had thoughts of very similar to what Oceanside Hospice has, like kind of a marked path, but putting a sign on the other end of the path to say, this is what this is. It's a wind phone, people go to grieve. If you see someone there, like please respect their space until they leave, or something of the sort, just to allow, like it's not necessarily As Jaylyn was saying, it's not necessarily like surveillance, but it's more privacy. There's a bit more, yeah, we're hoping, how can we infuse respect into this of the user?
Thanks, Katie. Any other thoughts kind of along those lines? Anyone kind of encounter anything like that, or concerns or ideas of how to kind of navigate that? Yes, Heather. Yes.
Sorry. Thank you, Katie. That is something that we've been have had a lot of discussions about, having a sign right at the beginning of the path to ensure privacy. So thank you very much. I appreciate the way you've worded it, and that helps us move along a little bit with that. Thank you.
I'm curious if anyone from today who's maybe this is the first time you've heard about wind phones, if you could see something like this being used in your community. Could you see it being a valuable resource and a place for people to go? Yes, yeah, Catchville.
Yeah, I mean, in my little area, and I'm not in BC, I'm in Ontario, but in my little area, we have at least two that I'm aware of. One and one that is going to be announced soon, I hope, anyways. And even then, I'm still finding that people, one, aren't aware of it just because we don't really talk about this stuff, right? But also that even having multiple in a given community is still more than like that. It doesn't hamper people's it doesn't seem, they don't get in the way of one another because they're in different parts of the city, right? And so it's closer and more convenient for one group of people in one area and closer and more convenient in another. And one of the ones that should be announced soon, if it hasn't already been, and I just haven't been paying attention, but is also in a nonprofit cemetery. So kind of that location that I can't remember your name, I'm sorry, but you were speaking about placing a phone in the cemetery. That's something that one of the cemeteries in the local area also was looking into doing. And it does lend itself well in terms of also, to Jayleen's point, of grief is a human experience. We don't all necessarily need professional accompaniment if we don't so choose, if we're not ready for it yet, if we're not ready to quite put those words or say it out loud to another person face to face. So I think that having those variety of options, so that it's one, closer for people, because not everyone has access to all kinds of different transportation. If it's super out of the way, rather than being a convenient spot for people to stop in, like different folks were talking about. So I think that even if there's already one, I think there's more than enough space in a given community to have those public spaces dedicated to acknowledging and speaking our grief, even if that's in a private way. Yeah, having multiple in our area has actually been really great to be able to direct people to something close to them.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, just some of the things that are pointed out or kind of pinpointed on as you were sharing was just that that it is such a personal journey, grief. And who are we to kind of prescribe what it should look like, right? As we all know, it is individual. And I think this can be such a powerful tool for people to maybe open that door. If they do need that extra support, to start working through it with someone. And yeah, everyone's experience with that is unique, and the time it might take for them to kind of get there to share with someone or to not share with someone. And yeah, that's what you were saying as well, but just having multiples, just being able to have that, get the awareness out there that it's not a bad thing, it's a great thing. Justine, thanks for your comment in the chat. You never heard of one before today, and you're from Saskatchewan. Would love to see if there's opportunity to get more within your province. So I don't know if there's anyone else here that's joining us from Saskatchewan, but that would be great to kind of get you connected with someone. And I'm sure if you'd like to, you're welcome to reach out to Heather or Brittany or anyone else here who's mentioned that they have one in their community about how they went about it. And maybe you can use some of those ideas in your own if you'd like to kind of be at the forefront of starting that. To see your question here, Anthony. Have those who've established a wind farm in their community consider creating a written resource that'd be helpful for other places to establish one locally?
We haven't, but I think that's a great idea. Anything we can do to help spread these through the provinces, I think they're important. And you know, Jaylene said we have to move away from the liability piece and allow people their grief and to have that moment themselves. I would be more than happy to speak with anybody about, you know, how it came about, how we built it. We were lucky we didn't, it was on our property, so we didn't have to go through the town or anything. So we were lucky to skip the political side of it. So
mywindphone.com has lots of good information about signage and other ideas about how to manage the phones. So, and they've got, of course, lots of physical images of the phones that, you know, different places and different builds. So if people are looking for ideas, that's a really good place to start. There is another website too that is similar, but I can't remember what it is. But there's lots of good information there.
Thanks, Sheila. If you think of it, or if you find it while we're still on the meeting here, feel free to message or email us. We'd love to share that with everyone. Thanks, Jaylene, for your comment. Just recognizing that there are many vulnerable and marginalized community members that do not have access to counseling, grief support, or other resources. Yes, thank you. Just acknowledging that this, what we have existing, what grief supports might look like, are not approachable for a lot of people for many reasons, perhaps. And maybe this is another way that might be approachable for some, and it is very cost effective. And so how can we kind of be supporting this in our communities? How can we support each other in using something like this in our community? And maybe it's not a phone. When I was just doing a little bit of research, some are using a wind box, and it's a similar maybe setup without a phone, but there's a pen and paper, and people are able to write messages, and it's put inside a locked box. So a similar type of experience that someone can have, and being able to maybe release and to kind of share out there, but no one's actually receiving their words, right? But just to be able to kind of help them process in that regard. So thank you so much, everyone. I just appreciate your comments here in the chat as well, and those who've shared. We are getting closer to our time. So I would just like to thank again, Heather and Brittany, for joining us here today and sharing just your experience and what your organization has done. And for those who shared as well, who attended, just thank you so much. I think there's a lot we could do here, and it'd be amazing to be able to put some sort of resource together that we can maybe make a little more public. And was mentioned earlier, is there a way that we can do a bit of research on this? So for those in certain settings where they want that kind of peer-reviewed, evidence-based type of thing, is there a way that we can kind of, be able to bring some of our experiences together to do that? I think that would be really neat to see. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. If you did want to stay on for another minute or so, you're welcome to, but we will let you go. When you leave the session, a survey will pop up. We do appreciate your feedback from today on how this session was for you. And we really do value, just hearing your feedback. So thank you so much, everyone. As mentioned, we will send out a follow-up email. And in that, we'll have a link to our next session in this series, which will be August 12th. So we'll put the information about what that session is in that follow-up email. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Katie.